Okay, back. So Lynn asked a question about blood sugar getting a little bit more imbalanced before her period, which is really interesting. And I'm going to wait for everyone to join that's going to join. But Lynn, yeah, that question by Lynn is interesting, because if blood sugar is imbalanced before a period, so like that luteal phase, hello again to you too. If blood sugar is imbalanced before a period, that could be a few things. So keep in mind that when progesterone's in the picture, progesterone actually really helps with glucose metabolism and protein metabolism. So when there's progesterone in the picture, your body prefers to burn glucose and protein. And during the luteal phase, if you're seeing your blood sugar levels get elevated, it could be a few things. Keep in mind that stress hormones impact blood sugar. The liver also impacts blood sugar. A lot of times when you have really bad fasting glucose, it has nothing to do with blood sugar and everything to do with your liver. So remember, like I said, if your body needs fuel, you get it in two ways. You either eat it or your body has to make it. And the way that it does that is by raising cortisol, sending your tissues, your amino acids from your muscles, your skin, your tissues to the liver. The liver is going to convert them into blood sugar. And so if you're seeing regularly elevated blood sugar, specifically in the morning, you might have a liver issue, which would make sense during the luteal phase, right? Your liver is burdened with hormones. There's not just estrogen in the picture. There's progesterone, there's testosterone, and then if there's stress as well, the body has to metabolize those things. So during that time, that's why I always say it's very important to focus on liver detoxification. It's very important to make sure estrogen is moving, because it can cause your cells to become a little bit more resistant to insulin. But if you're seeing that fasting glucose is high, then that might have everything to do with the liver as well. I have reintroduced dairy after 5 months. I crave it a lot now. Is it okay to eat it several times a day? Yeah, girl, you're seeing your body be like, hey, we're gonna make up for lost time now. So, you know, it is. It's one of those things where I see that a lot of women, when they start to tie it back in, their body just starts to crave it, because their body's finally like, yes, there's so many fat-soluble vitamins and nutrients coming from dairy that are very difficult to get from like plant foods. So it's one of those things where if you're reacting to it fine and it feels fine, there's no problem. Dairy is actually a wonderful source of protein. It's way more bioavailable than even like meat. I would put eggs, I would put bone broth and collagen at the highest of bioavailable proteins. Then I would put eggs, and then I would put dairy, and then comes meat. So it's a very bioavailable protein, very easy to digest if it doesn't inflame you. And so I don't see a problem with eating it multiple times a day, as long as it's high quality and it feels okay to you. But that might actually like balance out over time. I think when people reinstate dairy, their body's just like, oh my gosh, give me all the nutrients and in dairy, specifically the calcium, but also the fat-soluble vitamins. Dairy is actually very rich in iodine as well. So there are a lot of trace minerals in dairy. And keep in mind that dairy also has some progesterone-like properties and some thyroid-like properties. And so it does have almost like, it does support your hormones in those ways. Like I've, on my more restricted, when I was more restrictive with, especially when I was on paleo, I just didn't eat dairy for years because I just thought it was the devil. And when I tied it back in, when I went keto, that's the only thing that I learned from keto that was like good for me. I was like, oh my gosh, I feel so much better when I eat dairy, like holy crap. So I think like we still have to get over that dairy fear, I think, in our head. Like we still think like, oh, it's like this cheat food. And I'm like, no, it's like a part of a really healthy diet. And if you want it, eat it. That'll probably balance out. Like you probably won't want to eat it as much once you've kind of gotten your fill. Is a cloudy period an estrogen issue? Yeah, it's usually an estrogen issue, but it actually can be a cortisol issue as well. So a lot of people don't realize that when you're under stress, your body doesn't clot properly. Cortisol can actually cause clotting issues, and it can cause things like rosacea and blood, varicose veins and things like that, because it's affecting the blood vessels. So it usually is an estrogen issue, but it can also be a cortisol issue. So some people that have cloudy periods, but their estrogen is good, like they're detoxifying estrogen well, it's like what's going on, but they have high cortisol, that can be common, but most likely it is an estrogen issue. It's almost always an estrogen issue. I had a 44-day cycle with PCOS, which is shorter than usual. Can this be a sign of improvement? How to keep it up? Keep doing what you're doing. So when you try to get your cycles back to normal, a lot of women think it's like all or nothing. Like my periods are either 60 days apart or 28 days apart like they're supposed to be. A lot of times cycles start to balance in their own way. So let's say your cycle is like 60 days. You'll see a 44-day cycle as you improve, then a 35-day cycle, then a maybe 32-day cycle. You'll see things start to gradually move in the right direction, and that's how the body restores itself. It's not this linear process where it's like, I go to A to B and I'm healed. It's more like I'm starting to see slow improvements in the right direction. You have to think of it the same way. As you saw slow improvements in the wrong direction, it's going to be the same thing, slow improvements in the right direction. And that's how you kind of reverse things. That's how you get symptoms under control. It takes time. It takes work. It takes you constantly and consistently doing what you're doing. And then if something stops working, that's when you tweak things. But if you're seeing your cycles get shorter, congratulations. You're doing something right. Keep going. Keep doing what you're doing. That is a wonderful thing. I travel a lot, mainly flying. Can this be an issue for hormones? Well, yeah, I mean, think about it. When you're in a plane, you're being exposed to radiation, and you are being exposed to lots of jet fuel. So I do recommend that frequent flyers start to actually utilize masks. I don't think, it's one thing if you're just flying infrequently, but if you're always flying, I think the fluorescent lights in the plane can really bother you. So investing in some blue blocking glasses is important. Maybe even wearing a mask, especially when you're sleeping, just because it's I know you might feel stupid, but it's you're protecting yourself from jet fuel, and then it's one of those things where there's not a lot that you can do, but you can drink chlorophyll before and after to kind of protect yourself from the radiation that you're exposed to. Wearing some compression leggings can really help with blood circulation, or compression socks can really help keep blood circulating, because sometimes when you're on a plane, you're not circulating blood as well, and so you can end up kind of your body's not oxygenating as well. And then just overall, just kind of taking care of yourself like you always do, making sure you're eating good meals. I think with traveling, the biggest thing is you have this stress of flying on a plane pretty regularly, and then you're also your sleep is really disrupted, and then on top of it you're not eating normally, and so it's just a triple whammy. So it's you want to do the best you can to kind of make a good routine, and if this is your normal, then you kind of have to just make it your normal, and so really work hard to kind of figure out some things that you can do to support your body. And so you might need to get some chlorophyll powder, because obviously the liquid can't travel. I mean, well, it probably could, but you don't want it to spill everywhere. But yeah, the biggest thing is the mask, the blue blocking glasses to protect yourself from the fluorescent lights, and just overall, maybe doing something for liver support before and after a flight. What are my thoughts on intermittent fasting? So you guys have to understand that intermittent fasting is, when you fast, that's pretty much you saying, let's translate what a fast means to your body. You are starving, you need to make your own fuel. How does the body make fuel, you guys? It makes it by raising cortisol. This is why people begin intermittent fasting and feel amazing, but they might even lose some weight. They might even see, oh my God, the benefits. Oh, it's so amazing. And then, 2, 3, 4 months down the line, their hair's falling out in chunks. They have anxiety. They've thrown themselves into just HPA axis dysfunction, aka adrenal fatigue. They have thyroid issues, because fasting forces your body to eat itself alive. Now, a lot of people are like, well, then where are all these benefits from fasting coming? All these research studies coming out, the fasting's so good for you. And I'm like, the only benefit that comes from fasting is the fact that you're starving gut bacteria that create inflammatory toxins called LPS that make you insulin resistant and give you inflammation. And so when you're not eating and you feel better not eating, that is just you showing yourself that when you eat, an issue is being expressed. Not eating doesn't fix the issue, and many times forces the liver to go under extreme stress. Because keep in mind that when you're fasting, your liver is responsible for keeping your blood cells, or all your cells going, your blood sugar stable. Your body burns glucose regardless of if you're eating it or not. And so when you're trying to heal your hormones, the worst thing that you can do is force your body to make its own fuel. This is why in Fully Nourished, I have you eat every 2, 3, 4 hours max, and have a bedtime snack, and eat within an hour of waking, and don't go very long without eating at all. Because if you're really truly trying to heal your hormones, fasting is the opposite of what you want to do. And so many people have lost so much weight on fasting and all this stuff. And I'm like, this goes right along with the hedonist culture that we live in. It's like, you know, oh, the less you eat, oh, you must be so disciplined. You must be so you are just so good. Like, oh my God. And I'm like, yeah, you're such a great person for starving your body and forcing it to make itself fuel. That's a great idea, you know. And it's like we get obsessed with these things that I'm just like, it's so anti-body. We're just not listening to our bodies. We're not treating our bodies well, and we believe that, okay, some weight loss is, it just automatically X equals Y. Like, oh, weight loss equals it must be good for me. And I'm like, what if your body is literally burning fat under duress with stress hormones that are also eating your skin, your hair, your nails? You know, like it's breaking down your tissues. Like, why do we think that's a good thing? And so intermittent fasting can be helpful for people with severe gut issues, but severe gut issues still need to be fixed. And a lot of times what happens is people that have gut issues start intermittent fasting, they feel great, but then on the flip side, they destroy their hormones in the process. They stop ovulating, their thyroid's wrecked, adrenal issues, and I'm like, girl, that is not a place you want to be in, because it can sometimes take a year or two to recover from. So it's like one of those things where pick your poison. And if intermittent fasting makes you feel better, that shows you probably have some severe gut issues that need to be addressed. And that can be addressed by just eating easier digested foods, not eating so many fibers, eating very small, frequent meals throughout the day, and chewing your food very well. Like there are things that you can do to really help your gut health without having to fast. And healthy livers can fast about 12 hours without turning on cortisol. That's pretty much like if you have a really high functioning liver, meaning it's full of glucose, it's full of protein, it's very good at storing nutrients, very efficient, you can fast for 12 hours without turning on a stress response. But most women, by the time they wake up, meaning that like that sleeping time from the time that you ate your last meal of the day to the time you woke up, your cortisol's already turned on. You're already burning yourself for fuel because your body can't even sustain you through the night. That's most women. I personally don't think intermittent fasting is good. I've seen it actually throw 20 the worst case I saw was that 16/8 intermittent fasting threw a 24-year-old into early menopause, ovarian failure. I've seen obviously like anxiety and depression, and I've seen like, you know, awful things, but the biggest thing I saw was the early menopause. And I looked it up because I was like, is this a thing? Like, I knew that her doctor had told her, like, you're going through menopause at 24. But as I looked into it, there's actually quite a few women that have thrown themselves into early menopause with intermittent fasting. I quit birth control pills in December, and ever since then, I've been having brown discharge for months at a time. Any advice on how to regulate my hormones? I'm currently on a low-carb diet. That's probably why a lot of women can't go back to ovulating if they're not eating carbohydrates, just because, you know, the hypothalamus is taking in signals from the gut. And if you're on low carb, keep in mind that carbs tell the brain that you're satiated and you're fed. If there's no carbohydrates, a lot of times it equals famine. And the body does not want to reproduce in a famine. And it just can kind of signal that. So if you're having a hard time going back to ovulating, I think a lot of times we think like, oh, we're not having a period. And I'm like, well, yeah, you're not having a period, but the biggest issue is that you're not going back to ovulating, because if you don't go back to ovulating, you won't get a period. And so the goal is to actually go back to ovulating, and then you'll get a period. And so ovulation can be held back by stress issues. The biggest one is lack of carbohydrates. I see it all the time. And this is why I constantly say, like, hey, you know, if you truly want your body to feel fertile and able to reproduce, you got to eat those carbohydrates. You've got to eat those sugars, because the liver can't detoxify properly without glucose. And the signaling, I guess the CKK, which is an enzyme in your gut, is going to send to the brain to say like, hey, we're safe, we're fed, we're cared for. That's not going to happen if you're on a low carb diet. Now, I'm not saying that is the thing, but I would say if you haven't gotten a period since December, there's something holding you back from ovulating. And then I would also look into the thyroid. A lot of times long-term birth control use, it just shuts down progesterone production, and so that really takes a number on the thyroid. And so sometimes a long-term birth control use can just lead to hypothyroidism or conversion issue. If it's just a conversion issue, meaning you have free T3, low free T3, the best way to actually get your conversion back up is just by eating carbohydrates. carbohydrates. Your liver needs carbs to convert T4 to T3. This is why every single woman, I've actually never seen a woman come to me on keto that has adequate T3 levels. They always have low thyroid function, always. It's very interesting to me because it's science. Like, you need glucose or sugar to convert T4 into T3 and fuel your metabolism. But there are some other things. It could be, like I said, thyroid issues. It could be like, are you exercising a lot? Are you resting well? Are you eating enough? Sometimes low carb diets can also come with you not eating enough fats. Like, if you're on a low carb diet, you do need to replace carbs with fat. You can't just like not eat carbs. And then you want to make sure you're eating enough, and then you're not over exercising. But I would definitely, if that's not helping, if nothing's helping, I would actually look to the carbs. That would probably be the biggest thing that's holding you back from ovulating. Is PCOS technically an endocrine disorder? I have all the symptoms of PCOS, but don't have ovarian cysts and still have a regular period. So yeah, PCOS is actually just severe metabolic stress. It's really interesting to me because a lot of people think it's a reproductive issue, and it's not. It's a metabolic issue. It's a metabolic disorder that affects the reproductive system, which makes sense to me because if your metabolism is stressed out and your cells are stressed out, your ovaries aren't going to function, right? The body's like, I'm not going to reproduce when there's severe stress on the female's body, let alone the baby's body. Like, what the heck? The body knows best, and it doesn't want to reproduce when the female is under stress. And so I consider it a metabolic disorder, as does Western medicine. And it's one of those things where, but I think that there's a lot of root causes. I do think that T3 is very regularly low in women with PCOS. Every single woman with PCOS has some type of stress hormone issue, whether it's prolactin being high, whether it's estrogen being high, whether it's cortisol being high, whether it's adrenaline being high. There's always some type of stress driving, or DHEA. And then on top of it, there's always inflammation. So it's always an inflammatory condition. There's always inflammation stemming from the gut and the liver, which always needs to be focused on. So, you can have, it gets really interesting to me because everyone that has PCOS is like, oh, I have PCOS now. And I'm like, but once you got diagnosed with PCOS and now you've been living with PCOS, the 10 years before, you still had severe hormonal imbalances, and it all led up to severe metabolic dysregulation, right? Your metabolism started dysregulating probably when you were born and went throughout childhood and throughout your early adulthood until you ended up with a diagnosis of PCOS. It didn't just happen to you. It wasn't like, surprise, I have PCOS. It was like there was a severe hormonal imbalance and metabolic dysregulation happening for years before. And so, regardless of if you have the diagnosis of PCOS or not, the treatment is the same. If you don't have ovarian cysts, that doesn't mean that you don't have a metabolic issue or hypometabolic symptoms. And whether you have PCOS or not, treatment is the same. And you want to just focus on detoxifying estrogen, making sure your progesterone is good, making sure your conversion of T4 to T3 is good. You just want to make sure you're actually supporting your metabolism, getting your stress down, getting the nutrients you need. It's really very similar. This is why I always say, like, I'm a hormone and PCOS nutritionist, because I personally think that all hormonal imbalances should be kind of attacked the same way. But a lot of people with PCOS think they're like some special delicate flower, and I'm like, no, you're just severely metabolically dysregulated. The person that has the hormonal imbalances like 5 years before you, she's still in her journey, and it would probably end up in PCOS at some point in time, but someone with PCOS is just severely metabolic dysregulated. So all that to say is, like, if you have it or you don't, if you need the diagnosis, go search for it. But if you don't, just treat it all the same. Treat it as if you need to detoxify estrogen, you need to make sure your stress levels are low and your thyroid is functioning properly, you're supporting your gut and your liver, giving your body the nutrients it needs, etc. When is it expected to see gradual weight loss on a healing journey? It just kind of depends on your issues. There are a lot of people that aren't doing the right things, and so they think like they expect weight loss and they're not really getting to the root of the issue. Once you actually start to get to the root of the issue, it just kind of depends. The body does need a certain period of time to feel really safe and cared for, and sometimes this can be longer in some women than others. Some women start to see weight loss within 2-3 weeks. They feel amazing because they weren't doing well on the diets that they were on. Some women have severely gotten themselves to the point where, specifically women who are on low carb or keto diets, they have severely dysregulated their metabolism even further, to the point where now their body prefers burning free fatty acids, which is not a good state to be in, but the body has been forced to burn fat for fuel. And so now if you're trying to burn glucose and you want to actually be metabolically stable and lean without like constantly worrying about what you're eating, you have to actually get your body back to burning glucose, and then and slowly, without overloading it with carbs, and then you gotta like move it, you know, back into that fat burning or a glucose burning state, so that the body actually starts to burn what's stored. This can take sometimes 3, 4, 5 months, but I've seen it be very, very quick. This is why I always focus on measurements, pictures, and even like how you feel in your clothes. I recommend getting one outfit where maybe it's a little snug now, and you try it on like once every 4 weeks to see how your body's changed, and then take a picture in it. And I know it can be like really, a lot of women are like, I don't want to take a picture, but weight is so relative, especially if you're menstruating, if you're at a different point in your cycle. Let's say you didn't poop that day. Let's say you had more carbohydrates the day before than normal. Your muscles are going to be full of water. Or what about you building muscle? Are you going to be working out? You don't know if you're building muscle and that's taking the place of fat. You don't know if your body fat percentage is changing. So I highly recommend using how you're feeling as encouragement. You know, your moods, your cycles, your energy levels, your personality, your sleep, your digestion, and then also using pictures and measurements to really track progress. And then you can maybe check in with weight, once every 4 weeks or so. I don't like the scale because I think it really trips women up. I think women feel like, I'm feeling really amazing about myself, I'm feeling awesome, I feel really good, I feel lean, and then they step on that scale and it's only a 1 pound difference. And so it immediately just messes up their whole week because of one number on the scale. So it's one of those things where if you want to see body composition changes, you can track body composition changes without tracking weight. And who cares if you weigh 180 or 120, if you feel amazing, your body is a very comfortable place, you're toned in the right places, you like the way that you look, you feel really good. Who cares? A number is meaningless. And so, but I would say you should start to see some type of weight loss at the 2 or 3 month mark, or maybe something's not moving in the right direction. Is Soleil, Himalayan salt and lemon, bad for H. pylori? I have found conflicting data and still waiting on test results whether I have H. pylori or not. It seems to suppress my appetite. Is that bad? If Soleil suppresses your appetite, that's really interesting. We don't want things that suppress appetite, but I wouldn't say it's bad for H. pylori. Salt is usually really very antibacterial to the gut, and lemon is awesome for detoxification. So I wouldn't really worry about it. And especially with H. pylori, that's pretty gentle. And then when it comes to suppressing your appetite, I don't know. That's interesting that it suppresses your appetite, but I guess it could maybe be killing bacteria or things like that. But yeah, that is really interesting. I've never heard of it suppressing appetite, but I don't think it's bad for H. pylori at all. What's wrong with birth control? Well, birth control shuts down your cycle. So a lot of people don't recognize, they think it's regulating their cycle, but when you shut down your cycle, you're no longer making progesterone. You're completely relying upon synthetic estrogen and synthetic progesterone. I highly recommend, if you're interested in more, watching my highlight stories on birth control and just understanding how they shut down the cycle. I think a lot of women don't understand. They think that when they go on it, because they're getting a regular period, which is actually just a withdrawal bleed, they think their cycles are regulated. But this was actually a lie that was created in the 1950s when contraception was illegal. They had to figure out how to prescribe birth control without prescribing it as a contraceptive. So they started to say it was regulating women's issues, it would regulate women's periods, and they designed it so that you would get a bleed every 28 days. That is not a real period. It's just a withdrawal bleed, and it is not a period. Your cycle is completely shut down. We can think of it as almost like a chemical menopause in a sense. It's just completely shutting our cycles down, our ability to create progesterone. Progesterone is really anti-inflammatory and anti-androgenic, and a lot of women with PCOS or hormonal imbalances already have low progesterone. And so if you go on birth control for symptoms, a lot of times it doesn't make them better. It's just while you're on, it's kind of a band-aid, but then when you go off, it can actually be worse. But yeah, that's something that you definitely want to do your own research on and look into for yourself. How to get my doctor to prescribe bioidentical progesterone. It can be hard. Sometimes you can get them, like it just really depends on if they're open-minded or not. But you kind of want to like, you know your doctor. If they're going to be completely closed off to it, then they're going to be completely closed off to it. But if you can say like, hey, I need to check my progesterone levels, that would be the first thing. And then, say like, hey, I really would like to try some bioidentical progesterone. It's called Prometrium if they're going to prescribe it, or they can get it prescribed through a compounding pharmacy. That's kind of how you would start. But a lot of people have a hard time. That's why it is available over the counter in a cream form or tincture forms. And some people just have to end up experimenting on their own. It can be nice to work in coinciding with your doctor, like saying like, hey, I really am going to try some progesterone cream. I would really love if you could prescribe me something and we could work together on this and be partners in this. But obviously if they're not going to help you, they're not going to help you. So it's kind of one of those things where you have to feel it out. And that's just kind of, but yeah, you know your doctor and you know how to kind of work them to get them to prescribe something. Thank you for your recent post on androgen excess. Appreciate it very much. Oh, I'm so glad. I think sometimes it can be really confusing and there's a lot of conflicting information out there, really. Like I'm just sometimes flabbergasted. I have PCOS. Could bioidentical progesterone help? Hell yeah, girl. Most women with PCOS have an estrogen excess, whether it's in their tissues or it's showing up clearly on a blood test. But keep in mind that progesterone is needed to mobilize estrogen, and estrogen drives insulin resistance. So it's very interesting that the main symptom of PCOS is insulin resistance, and estrogen drives insulin resistance. It also drives, heavy clotty periods, or it can cause irregular periods, and it drives inflammation and all symptoms of PCOS. So I really think that progesterone is an amazing thing for women with PCOS, because most women with PCOS aren't ovulating regularly, and that's the only way you make progesterone, right? You want progesterone because it's anti-androgenic, it's anti-estrogenic, it's anti-inflammatory, it helps with glucose metabolism, it helps your cells burn glucose, and it helps your thyroid. And that is really going to be the cornerstone of if you burn glucose well or if you store a lot of fat. And so overall, I think progesterone is usually helpful for most women with PCOS. It is good to get your progesterone levels tested before you supplement with it, but some women just can't, or their doctors aren't working with them, and I don't think that should hold you back from being an advocate of your own health. Illuminate Exposure said I missed her question. Oh no. Okay. Purchase Sarah's skin balancing program, waiting with empathetic patience for Fully Nourished. I know a lot will overlap. When did you begin to focus on your skin in relation to Fully Nourished? Oh, that's a great question. So Sarah's skin rebalancing protocol is super awesome. She focuses mostly on the topical. I think that you should always be focusing well on the topical and doing kind of the right topical applications while you're working on your diet. I think it could really speed up skin healing a lot quicker. Whereas it's like one of those things where I personally think like a good skincare routine should be done regardless of how your skin is reacting. You know what I mean? Like it's like a lot of us act like, oh, our skin doesn't deserve it because it's just so naughty. It's like, well, our skin deserves a good treatment regardless of if we are getting what we want from it or not. And then you can just, I guess, wait with quiet. Like, I don't recommend having complete expectation, like I'm doing the XYZ to clear my skin. I know that's something in the back of your head, like I want my skin to clear up, like I would love if my acne was cleared up, but at the same time, if you're doing every single thing in your life for that purpose, you're gonna be really disappointed if your skin doesn't do what you want it to do. So I think it's important to always have a good like skin care routine while you're going through Fully Nourished. I think that when you have skincare issues, sorry, I had to burp. When you have like acne issues and skin issues, it's best to really, I want you when you're going through Fully Nourished to really keep your ears open for when I talk about estrogen issues and detoxifying estrogen and the things that are going to support liver detoxification and estrogen dominance and bind to estrogens, because that alone is going to be very, very huge for you. But a lot will overlap in Fully Nourished and Sarah's skin balancing program, but not enough for it to really it's a great complement to each other for sure. I always have focused on my skin before now I have clear skin and my skin's not finicky at all. I used to have horrible skin. I had dermatitis, I had acne all over my face and my chest and my back, and I guess I just kind of realized at some point, like I'd spent so much money and so much time on topical things that I realized at some point, like, this is not topical. This is not something that I'm doing on the top of my skin. It's something internal. And so I continued to do really good, like, topical things, but at the same time, I started really focusing internally and just kind of giving my skin the space to do its thing. And it took 6 to 8 months to really, like, get my skin to where it is now. But yeah, it happened, you know, like it just took time, and I didn't really obsess about my skin. Like, of course, I covered it up with makeup and I was just really embarrassed by it. But at the same time, I just was like, what else can I do? You know, I'm doing everything I possibly can be doing, and I'm going to just put my energy into that. And over time, it did improve for sure. I love sunbathing. Can it be too much and stressful for the body? I think being out in the sun every day is really, really good. I think it just kind of depends on how much you're doing. If you never want to burn when you're out in the sun, that's really important. Like, you don't want to burn. Once you burn, you're actually causing free radicals and sun damage, and that's not what you want. But getting enough sun is really good. The only thing is it can deplete you of certain B vitamin, riboflavin, vitamin B2. So if you find that you're kind of getting tired at certain times of the day, or you get really, really like kind of depleted after sun, you might need some a good B vitamin complex, or specifically some riboflavin. What are your thoughts on menstrual cups? I personally use one. I really like them. I think they're a great way to kind of track how much you're bleeding. I think it's hard to like know how much you're bleeding when you're using a tampon or a pad, and it's very clear when your menstrual cup is full of blood. Like, you know exactly how much you're bleeding, and you can know if you're bleeding too much. So I like them. Sometimes I don't like sometimes they leak when I'm sleeping, especially on my heavier days, and I don't like to have to like wake up worried, like, oh my God, it's gonna be a crime scene, you know? So sometimes I can get like, they're really good throughout the day because you could just pop them in and you don't even feel them, like you forget you're on your period. But during the evening, like sometimes I'll just end up using an organic tampon or something like that, just so I don't have to like think about it, because sometimes it will like disrupt my sleep. But overall, I really like menstrual cups. I think they're really convenient, and yeah, I think they're really great for the environment, obviously less wasteful, but they're not for everyone. Some women say that they make their cramps worse. Some women don't actually like how they feel. So I think it's really like your period should be yours, and no one should make you feel bad if you still like to use tampons or pads. You know, like I think it's like the cool new thing, which is cool. Like it's nice, and it is convenient to me personally, but I think every woman needs to be comfortable when she's on her period, and that's the most important thing. Whatever you need to use, that's what you should use. Hi Jessica, would you use your red light therapy on your thyroid? Yeah, I do it all the time actually. I'll get like, when I'm stressed, sometimes my thyroid on this side will get a little bit like enlarged, and I just know it's stress. It's estrogen and stress. So I will definitely use red light therapy on my thyroid. Like right now I'm using it mostly on my scalp and like especially my hairline, but I'll kind of like tilt my head back and have it on there for a couple minutes as well. Have you seen messed up hormones because of binge eating? I've struggled with that, and my cycles are not very normal or seemingly healthy at all. Yeah, so binge eating is really, it's tough on the body, because a lot of times, especially if we're binging on super unhealthy foods, because I know that there are people that binge on healthy foods too. Like, binge eating is not necessarily like, you know, just processed foods. It can also be like super healthy foods as well, like nut butters, for example. So yes, it can, because all of that food at once can really like affect our digestion. There's a lot right now. This is a kind of a tangent I'll go back to in a second, but right now there's like this really weird, there's a few people on YouTube that are, and there's like, you know, the mukbang culture and just this binge culture is now like all of a sudden kind of popular right now, which is really interesting to me. But there are people, like fitness people, that are promoting like a cheat day when it's really just, she is straight up binging. And there's a few women on YouTube that are doing that, and they're, you know, under the guise of being fit or being athletic, and they're just having a cheat day. And I'm like, no, that's not a cheat day, that's a binge. That is a straight up binge. And so I think like with binge eating, it's important to notice, there's a lot of people right now that are like on social media that have some disordered eating habits, and it's important to like get them out of your consciousness and get them off your feed for sure, and just kind of understanding like that's not normal, even though they're promoting it as normal. When it comes to binge eating, like, and hormones, yes, you can actually watch these women on YouTube and that struggle with like do mukbang or binging, and I'm just using this as kind of a representation of if you can see their hormones changing, is, you know, these high amounts of sugar, high amounts of fat, or just large meals in general can absolutely, our body has to process these things. So it's really hard on our blood sugar. It can be stressful depending on what we're eating. You know, it can raise our cortisol levels, but also like I think sometimes binging can also be done out of a need, like we have stress going on in our life, and so we're actually binging because of that. Our body's overriding our brain for the dopamine and for those kind of like happy feel good hormones. So I have seen insulin resistance as a result of binge eating, leptin resistance, whether that's the cause or the effect, I'm not sure. Blood sugar imbalances, hypo or hyperglycemia. There's like, you know, there a lot of women can struggle with just like stress issues, sleep issues, metabolic issues, because the bottom line is like huge amounts of food in one sitting is really hard for the body to process, especially if that's happening consistently over time. However, it's not something that you want to like be hard on yourself about. That's something that, you know, the ultimate focus for you is just focusing on working on binging. And I actually have talked about, I don't know if you saw my story on binge eating, but I talk about the physical components I've seen coinciding with binge eating, because that's something that I struggled with in the past as well. And I personally had messed up cycles, and I've seen multiple women with messed up cycles, just because I think that constant binging is stressful on the body, and it can create stress, and that can cause irregular ovulation or low progesterone, which can cause like light periods and irregular periods. So yeah, that can absolutely affect your hormones for sure. I find it hard to exercise regularly. I have ons and offs. Could this be an issue, or should I go as I feel? I think it's important to know when it's laziness and when it's your body saying no. I think there's a big difference, and each person is very different. Some people are just being lazy, but some people are truly tired. Their body is fatigued, and their body's telling them. There's a difference between listening to our bodies and being lazy, and you kind of have to figure out what that is. If you don't enjoy the exercise you're doing, that could also be a huge deal. Like if you don't enjoy that exercise, you're not going to want to go. Also, it might like coincide with certain times of your cycle. Like maybe you're trying to force yourself to work out when you're on your period. That's not a great time to work out. So I would kind of listen to your body and kind of try to determine if you're being lazy or if you're truly actually needing a break. It is good to move your body regularly, even if it's just walking out the door and going on a walk really quickly. So I think it is important to listen to your body and listen to your intuition, but you also do need to be moving your body, whether that's through whatever movement you like to do. But yeah, I've been there before for sure. And it's hard to know, like, am I being lazy, or am I actually, do I truly need to get to the gym and force myself? Do you have any recommendation for dealing with hormone-related depression? Yeah, I mean, so it's like one of those things where if it's hormone-related, a lot of times progesterone can be very helpful. That's something that you really want to talk to your doctor about. A lot of times hormone-related depression is directly caused by estrogen, and really focusing on estrogen detoxification and getting your progesterone levels higher can be really, really helpful. But that's definitely something that whenever my clients struggle with hormone-related depression, I always encourage them to talk to their doctor about bioidentical progesterone, because I've seen it be so helpful before. I would love for you to show us how to read our lab results, for example, T3, T4, TPO, cortisol, testosterone, maybe like a chart or a website that we can trust. BS, because numbers are so confusing. Yeah, the thing about this is I've always thought about doing like a hormone levels guide. The only problem is so many labs test in different, I guess, like amounts. So some will do like nanograms per deciliter, some will do like nanograms per milliliter. It's just so, like, every lab is so different. And so it can actually be pretty tough to come up with like a chart or a label. But when it comes to thyroid stuff, you should look into Isabella Wentz. Isabella Wentz is a pharmacy doctor, a doctor of pharmacy, I believe, and she has extensive like handouts and guides for what your thyroid readings should be. So she's a great resource for that, and I'm definitely going to come up with something like that. I just have to kind of figure out like what I'm going to do with all the different numbers that it could be. You know, there's so many different reference ranges, and labs kind of measure in different ways. What are your thoughts on CBD? I've heard a few ND recommending it for women's hormonal balance. CBD is one of those things where it can help in some women and it can be absolutely useless in others. So it's like one of those things where if it works for you, that's cool. If it doesn't, who cares? Like, move on. It can be expensive, especially the ones that you want to be purchasing. It does need to be organic. It does need to be processed well. You do need to trust the company. It does need to be potent enough. And those will kind of run you very expensive, $100 to $150 a small bottle. Pills don't really... Keep in mind that anytime you orally take something in a pill form, it has to be digested through the digestive system, which usually like takes a little while and is not as effective. So you always want to choose like a tincture, or even if it's a vape, I guess, would be okay through the lungs. So it's like one of those things where, again, I personally like saw very minimal results from it, and I'm not willing to spend the money for minimal results. But if it works for you, that's amazing, and that's your experience. So I just think it's like one of those things where if something works for you, great. If it doesn't, don't waste your money on it. What are your thoughts on air conditioning? Is it a no-no because of mold, or could be okay? Oh, girl. Air conditioning all around, man. I mean, if your system has mold in it, get that mold removed, but I mean, I live in Southern California. It's like 100 degrees in the summer. Like, I'm going to turn the air on for sure. But yeah, I mean, if it's moldy, if your house is moldy, that's a whole different story. That's an issue for sure. But I don't think it's like the air conditioning that's the fault. The mold is the fault. So that's kind of like, I guess, my spiel. I have PCOS and I've just come on my time of the month, but this time around I've noticed I'm not on a full period. It's just a slow and little flow and not much on my pad. Why is that? I'm not sure. It could be a million things. It could be of like a recent anovulatory cycle, or have you implemented new changes? Did you implement progesterone? I mean, there's so many things that could be happening. But if you're regularly heavy, yeah, I mean, I'm wondering if you like implemented something new, or if you've been working on detoxifying estrogen or something like that, because usually heavy periods are due to estrogen. What's wrong with birth control? I already answered that question, but like I said before, check out my highlights on birth control, and so you can kind of understand more about how it works. Can you please link the bulb you purchased for red light therapy? Yeah, I need to look into my Amazon history to look at what the brand is. I think it's called a Brighter Idea, ABI, red light therapy bulb and it's like a grow light, 660 nanometers. I do remember those facts. Sometimes I have quite low pulses and feel dizzy, and sometimes palpitations. What could cause this? Well, what's your habits like during the day? If you are getting low pulses, that's just a sign of like a very low metabolism. And so that shows like probably need to eat pretty frequently and get enough sugar, get enough salt, get enough fat, get enough protein. If you're having palpitations, at that point you need to ask yourself, what have you done over the course of the day that stressed you out? Did you not eat enough? Did you not get enough sleep the night before? Have you not exercised, or did you exercise too much? Did you get enough sunlight? So you need to start using the process of elimination to start tracking what affects your pulses, both positively and negatively. And that's when you start to really figure out what works for you. Why would Vitex cause smearing and depression-like symptoms? If it works by increasing progesterone, does it mean bioidentical progesterone would cause the same symptoms? How Vitex affects dopamine, bad memory loss? I'm not, it's really interesting because a lot of women are so gung-ho about using herbs because they feel they're so much more natural. But I find that herbs can be very much wild cards. They can be like either really amazing or really awful, or a mixture of both. And so Vitex doesn't really necessarily raise progesterone. It acts upon the pituitary gland in the brain. And the pituitary gland is what's going to actually send the signals to the ovaries to ovulate, right? And so it does raise luteinizing hormone. And you should never, ever, 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 ever take Vitex until you get your luteinizing hormone levels checked. Because if you already have high LH and you take Vitex, it is going to raise your LH, and it will make you depressed. It will affect your brain negatively, and it will actually raise estrogen levels. So you do not want to take Vitex unless you know how to take Vitex. And I find that it doesn't work for everybody. And it definitely doesn't work for a lot of women with PCOS because a lot of women with PCOS have high LH. So it doesn't technically raise progesterone levels. It does in the sense that if it acts upon the brain, sometimes the brain will start communicating with the ovaries better, and that will result in a better ovulation and more progesterone. But that doesn't always mean that it works for everybody. It's a ovarian adaptogen. But yeah, if it's not working for you, it's just not working for you. I wouldn't say that bioidentical progesterone would work in the same way that Vitex does because they don't work the same way. To answer your question, I'm taking some multivitamins that fizz up in water and I'm on metformin. That's all. Could any of that have to do with my period? Yeah, I mean, especially if that's recent, that could have been. Thank you so much for your time. You're absolutely amazing and helped me so much through Instagram. Can't wait for FN. Oh, I appreciate it. Of course. Going to try progesterone cream for the first time. What would your advice be for those new to it? It's all new to me. Yeah, so you just want to really start conservative. I guess that would be like my biggest thing is just be very conservative with progesterone always. You always want to start with less rather than more and work your way up. And then when it comes to progesterone, you also want to make sure you're supporting your liver in some way, shape, or form. You don't just want to like start with supplementing progesterone. So chlorophyll or milk thistle or doing coffee enemas regularly or castor oil packs, whatever it is that will offer some liver support, that's really important when you're supplementing progesterone. A raw carrot every single day to just keep estrogen flowing, just making sure, because progesterone can mobilize estrogen. That's usually the biggest cause of negative side effects when it comes to progesterone cream. And that's why it's like you do want to make sure your body's moving estrogen properly. And that's kind of what you really want to focus on. But overall, usually bioidentical progesterone affects women in a very positive way. Hey Jessica, what can a longer cycle delayed period imply? Longer cycles, remember you guys, so I know we always think like, okay, our period is the star of the show. No, no, no. If your period is late, your ovulation is late. Because remember, if your follicular phase is lasting longer and you're ovulating later, your period's going to come later. And so you always have to go back to 2 weeks before. What happened around ovulation time that could have prevented you from ovulating on time? Was it stress? Did you drink too much? Did you travel? Did you get in a fight with your boyfriend? What the heck was going on during that time? Did you eat enough? Were you over-exercising? Did you run a marathon? What's going on around the time that you ovulated? And did that prevent you from ovulating on time, which would eventually lead to a later period? You mentioned charcoal and vitamin E after eating out. Why is this and how to do that? Well, I mean, when you eat out, you're getting exposed to polyunsaturated fats, industrial seed oils, canola oils, soybean oil, whatever it might be. They cook in crappy oils and they cook with crappy food. That's just the bottom line. Restaurant dinners and meals are disgusting. And if you've ever worked in the restaurant industry, you know that to be a fact. It's disgusting. So, when you eat out, you kind of want to protect yourself from those oils, and vitamin E will directly protect your body against the effects of those oils. Not completely, but enough to kind of prevent that meal from causing too much damage. And then I do charcoal because I can't control if the food is organic. I can't control like what the heck is sprayed on that food. Like I don't even know what quality the food is. I have no idea if there's parasites on the food. I don't know if that dude that person that's cooking my food washed their hands or not after they left the bathroom. I mean, I've seen way too many parasites on gut tests to be anything more than cautious. And so charcoal to me just absorbs anything that could possibly damage my system or cause issues after a meal. Now, call me a little bit that it is a little extra, I guess, to take those things, and it's not like something that you want to like stress about or worry about. It's just something that like I know from eating out, I just don't feel my best, and so that's kind of what I do to kind of prevent. Aspirin for inflammation, ? Or is it too hard on the stomach? I personally take like a baby aspirin every single day just because I like it for the inflammation. It's really helped with my rosacea. It's helped with my hair loss, things like that. So I personally take one every day. It does need to be taken on with food. You don't want to take it on an empty stomach, that's for sure. And it does deplete you of glycine, that specific amino acid. So as long as you're eating enough collagen or gelatin or bone broth, then I think it would be fine. What causes being bloated or getting constipation? Lots of things. I actually have a whole highlight story on constipation and how to get things moving, and it's actually labeled poop. Really straightforward there. I have PCOS and have had periods for 18 months consistently without birth control. How do I know I'm ovulating? Well, usually if you have consistent periods, you usually are ovulating, but the best way to do it is using the fertility awareness method or tracking with using temperature and your other body signs. So I actually have a story called labeled FAM, or fertility awareness method, that will teach you how to track your cycles. Advice on healing Hashimoto's and thoughts on natural desiccated thyroid versus synthetic T4 only. Yeah, so when it comes to Hashimoto's, it's just showing you that your thyroid is inflamed, and keep in mind what inflames the thyroid. Estrogen, pesticides, heavy metals. And so really when it comes to Hashimoto's, you want to focus on the gut and the liver, and you want to really focus on getting your inflammation down and getting your nutrients up. And so consistent eating, every 3 to 4 hours, nutrient-dense foods that are not inflammatory to the thyroid is very important. Avoiding polyunsaturated fats is everything when it comes to Hashimoto's. Polyunsaturated fats are so damaging to the thyroid tissue. And then, when it comes to synthetic T4, you have to understand that T4 still needs to be converted to T3 in both the liver and the gut. And many times in Hashimoto's, you are not converting T4 well at all to T3 in the first place. And so natural desiccated thyroid gives you the proper blend of T4, T3, T2, and T1, which is going to help you get your T3 levels up and help you feel better. I find that natural desiccated really does help women feel better over synthetic T4, just because their body still has to go through that extra step of converting T4 to T3, which many times is already impaired. Trisha says, thoughts on gut health supplement Restore? Yeah, it's just the same as what it's called. I'm sorry, I'm blanking. There's another supplement on the market that's the same. It's that's what it is, humic fulvic minerals, and it's been around forever, and he just took it and bottled it in a pretty package and is promoting it as the ultimate thing. It's been around forever. It's humic fulvic minerals, and you can get one for half the price on Amazon and try it out for yourself. I have a bottle in the frickin' fridge. It's just minerals from old humic substances deep within the earth, and a lot of people need minerals. A lot of people need those deep soil nutrients, and it can be helpful in some senses of the word, but in all honesty, some people get really bad detoxification symptoms from it, which is a good thing, but in the end, sometimes people just don't see any benefit from it, and I find that his specifically is so expensive, and I'm not convinced that it's any different than other humic fulvic substances. So until he can explain to me why his is worth $50 more, I'm boo. I'll stick to the old, ugly packaging, the brand that's been around forever. And I cannot, I'm spacing on the brand, but if you type in humic fulvic substances on Amazon, there's a bottle. It's it just looks like 90s packaging. When I poop, I don't feel like I've completely gotten it all out. How can I help this? It just kind of depends on what's going on. Sometimes psyllium husk can help clear things out. You don't want to get reliant upon it. Cascara sagrada can sometimes be helpful. Usually what's happening is there's inflammation in the gut, and so things are getting caught on the gut walls, and that's what's happening. Or you're not having a full bowel movement because you're not in the right position. So do you have a squatty potty? Are you in a squat position, or are you just kind of seated on the throne? So those would be the kind of the things I'd look into. And then magnesium can help, and so can aloe vera. Birth control castrates women. I took that poison first 15 years, not knowing all the crap that I was doing to give me. Now that I'm 39, do your research before you take it. Now I have hypothyroidism and Hashimoto's. Yeah, I know, girl. It sucks. And I wish, it's all of us that took birth control and now are struggling afterwards. We wish we would have known, it's just we wish we would have known. And now hindsight is 20/20 for sure. And some women though have to go through their own journey as well. Some people don't really understand the weight of shutting down your own cycle. I know I didn't understand. Who cares, right? Like, I barely have a period. That's so awesome. Like, who cares, right? But you finally understand the weight of shutting down your own cycle when you get diagnosed with 3 autoimmune diseases and polycystic ovarian syndrome. You know what I mean? And you're seeing the weight of that too. Hi, Miss Shelby. Low estrogen and progesterone, no regular periods ever in my life, just turned 30 and symptoms of menopause, no periods in 3 years post having a baby. Yeah, I mean, because when you have a baby, your progesterone levels are high, and then afterwards they'll just go, they'll go back into the trash can if you don't actually get yourself ovulating again. So yeah, that's definitely something where I would really ask my doctor about bioidentical progesterone. Keep in mind that when you have low estrogen, it's very interesting because you haven't had a period in 3 years. I would look into progesterone. I would also get a full thyroid panel. Sometimes hypothyroidism can be hidden in just like lack of periods, early menopause, that type of thing. So I would really look into those. A full thyroid panel, my progesterone levels, and I know you said you have low progesterone. So what has your doctor offered you the option of supplementing progesterone? Gluten-free, eat pretty clean, lots of carbs, take Vitex, and just incorporating bioidentical progesterone pills. Any other tips for getting things going? That is really what I would do. Like, if you're just incorporating the bioidentical progesterone, I would give that time. But like I said, I would also check into your thyroid. And if you really want to get a full thyroid panel, not just, a TSH, T4, T3, where is your free T3 levels at? And then where is your reverse T3? Those are 2 things that can really affect the cycle. I have PCOS and I'm thin. I don't have any problem with my insulin test. Do I still have to take metformin? That's up to you and your doctor. I think it's important to kind of do your own research on metformin and kind of decide for yourself if you need it or not. That's something that you can kind of ask your doctor about. But yeah, metformin is just kind of like that, protocol that they just throw at every PCOS case. But there are ways to treat PCOS naturally if you kind of do your own research and you take your own responsibility. But yeah, it is important to make that decision alongside of your doctor and weigh the pros and cons, read the pamphlet that comes with it, and just kind of decide what works best for you. How accurate are Wandfo ovulation test? I took one today and it's positive. I've never heard of the Wandfo ovulation test. If it's just like an LH strip test, they can be accurate. Keep in mind that some women with PCOS have really elevated luteinizing hormone. Keep in mind that estrogen stimulates the brain to secrete luteinizing hormone, which then tells the body to drop an egg. But if there's no egg to drop, or that's a chronic issue, meaning that estrogen's constantly telling the brain LH is high, and then that process is happening over and over again, you might have chronically elevated levels of LH. A lot of women with PCOS are taking those LH strips, and they are getting false positives of ovulation with LH strips. So usually they're pretty accurate though. It just kind of depends. Are you tracking your cycles using temperature and pulses as well, or temperature and cervical position and cervical mucus? Those 3 together can be really helpful. But yeah, so I got through all the questions. I'm going to do a last call for questions really quickly. And I thank you guys for spending 2 hours. Tonight I'll put all of the lives from Wednesday and today onto YouTube, so you guys can come back and watch them if you want to. But yeah, I really appreciate your guys' time and hanging out with me on Friday mornings. I know I keep you guys a lot, but yeah, so if you guys did get okay, we have one more question. I love last calls for question. Everyone's like, let's get them in. How can you regulate the menstrual cycle? Food is a very long process. When I take Dufaston, that's the only time I get my period. Remember that a period without ovulation is not really a true period. Just because you have a bleed doesn't mean you're having a period. Your goal is to actually ovulate and not just get a period. And so that's really the goal with PCOS, is you want to get yourself ovulating again. And that's really what's going to regulate the menstrual cycle. I have some awesome stories on progesterone, your menstrual cycle, regulating your periods. So I really highly recommend looking through my highlight stories. Thank you so much for sharing all this women's info. Your Q&As are like an empowering women's TED Talk. Love you, girl. Oh, you're so sweet. I would love to. Yeah, we don't even need TED Talks when we have live Q&As. Can you speak to the risks of hyaluronic acid fillers? Hyaluronic acid fillers are not as bad as Botox, botulism poison, I should say, which is a neurotoxin. But you know, anytime you're putting an organic acid or some type of substance into your face, you're close to your brain. It's going into your bloodstream, and it can cause issues. Not always, but it can. Hyaluronic fillers are honestly, like, I haven't seen a lot of women have issues with them, but a lot of times when you're getting hyaluronic fillers, you're also getting other issues. And my biggest problem with some cosmetic procedures is not necessarily the safety of them. I do have a problem with breast implants and Botox, but hyaluronic fillers, the biggest thing is a lot of times you're filling your lips with them, right? And your lips are a muscle that can actually really point to issues going on with the body. And so when you have when your lips are thinning, you're actually losing muscle. It's showing that cortisol is eating your tissues. Or if you're having like pale lips or lack of circulation to your lips, that can be a sign that something's off, right? And so when we're constantly filling our lips, we're covering up signs that our body's showing us there are issues going on. But I need to look more into hyaluronic fillers to make sure their safety is okay, because I bet you I could find something. It's probably not the hyaluronic acid in itself. It could be other things that are put into those fillers. Okay, Instagram's telling me I have 20 more seconds. So Megan says that she has chronic candida. Well, whatever the oral antibiotic that they give you should listen to them, especially if you have chronic issues. All right, love you guys. They're cutting me out. Bye.